So have you ever heard the term, oh no, it was lady driven and it was only driven to the shop and back like 5 kilometers? Oh, that must be a really good car to buy. Welcome guys, welcome back to the channel. And more specifically, welcome back to not being conned out there. So recently I've been getting a few requests where people have asked me to do videos on what and how to look out for when purchasing a used car. Now this can apply to a variety of cars out there, not specifically just a BMW. So use it, don't use it. If you want to, it's up to you. But anyway, this is an informative video, and looking forward to seeing what your guys' comments are. And if I have missed out anything, or if you feel that there's anything else you can add to it for the community, leave it in the comments below so that other guys can have a look and see what else I might have missed. But these are my 20 things that I would look out for when purchasing a used motor vehicle, especially if it's turbocharged. Now before we get into the list, I want to make it very clear out there that certain modifications on the car are acceptable. Like for example, a charge pipe. I don't see no harm in that there. So if somebody has replaced the charge pipe, it actually shows that they care that the plastic charge pipe that has come with your particular car is most probably going to break. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it with a better quality part, and that better quality part actually adds to the value of the car. The other modification that I would consider to be acceptable would be like downpipes. I don't think that will cause any harm to the car. An exhaust as well, an intake wouldn't harm the car as well. When I would start to be wary about modifications is when you have stuff like upgraded turbos, or the motor was rebuilt, or there's auxiliary fueling going through the car, because that is a bit more fine-tuned. If you get it wrong, you can actually hurt the motor itself. So those days of I want to buy an unmodified car, those days are long time over. I mean, these days you can buy a modified car, and if done correctly, or if it was tuned correctly, you could actually score a luck. I don't know, but what I do know is that those modifications that I initially mentioned, those are okay. There's nothing really wrong with them. So first is go through and have a look at the car, but do it during the day. Have a look at it in the sunlight. For obvious reasons, you want to do that during the day, and the reason being that the way the light or the sunlight reflects off the car will give you an indication as to the condition of the paintwork, whether the car was resprayed, whether it was involved in an accident, things like that there. So have a look at the car during the day, and try to go and see the car when the car is cold. Do not go and see the car when the car is warm. And there are various reasons why I would say go out there and look at the car when it's cold. Now remember, there are many things you can Google and research as to what to look about on a used car, but these are things that are not so common and people don't really talk about. The first thing is that when you go and look at the car and when it's cold, especially on an N54, it will give you an indication of whether you have a leak in injector, a misfire at startup, as well as you get to put your hands inside the motor when it's still cold to feel whether an oil leak is there. Sometimes oil leaks are not visible, but if you put your hand inside and if you rub your hand along the side of the sump, you might be able to feel an oil leak, or touch the belt to see the condition of the belt, or move some pipes around to see if there's any coolant leaks or things like that there. So that's why I encourage you to view the car when it's cold. The other reason why I would suggest viewing the car when it's cold is that if you have access to a spark plug socket, you are able to take out the spark plugs from the car, and what that will allow you to do is to see the condition of the plugs. If the plugs are completely black, there's either an ignition issue. Ignition in terms of either fueling or timing, especially on the N54 with leaking injectors. You don't want to buy one and then end up spending 6,000 Rand on a single injector after the fact, when you could have preempted this before and maybe used it in your negotiations, and the amount you have negotiated on, you will be able to replace the injectors. Then again, why on cold start, or why would you want to view the car when the car is cold? The other aspect of it is that you get to see the valve stem seals. So meaning if the valve stem seals are bad, generally on first startup she'll smoke and then the smoke will disperse afterwards. So that's another indication why you can go and have a look at the car when the car is cold. New cars are so easily, and this is point number 2, new cars are so easily manipulated in terms of mileage. It is extremely easy. It's one of the most easiest things to do. And generally guys get conned and they are told, no, you are able to buy a low mileage car and the price looks phenomenal. Meantime, that car got like most probably 100 or 200,000 more on the clock itself. So have a look at the interior, see the condition of the side bolster, if it's torn, see the condition of the clutch pedal if it's a manual car, see the condition of the steering wheel, see the condition of the gear knob. That will give you an indication as to the mileage, whether it's appropriate or not. Again, this is just an indication. The other thing you can look for when buying a used car is that BMW specifically uses these black painted screws, and these screws are placed underneath the cluster. There's 2 screws underneath the cluster, as well as below the steering, underneath by the kick panel, there's a line of screws there. I would have a look at those particular screws, as if I find scratch marks on those screws and things like that there, it indicates, and it's not conclusive that the mileage has been tampered with, but it indicates that those screws were removed. And I would ask the question, why was it removed? Now, I'm not going to go into the procedure as to how you actually manipulate the mileage on the BMW, but what I'm going to suggest is that it will probe you to asking the questions as why the scratches on those screws. You don't have to confront the owner about it, but it's something for you to ponder on. So at some point the car would have had motor plan. And during that motor plan, and even if it was serviced afterwards, some people keep a record after the fact. But what I would look out for is the brake pads, the number of times the brake pads were replaced. And what that gives you an indication of is how the car was driven. Whether it was driven in a spirited manner, whether it was just driven normally, mileage itself. So for example, a set of brake pads and discs, this would generally last in the region of about 50,000, 60,000 kilometers. Brake pads as well, around about the 40,000 kilometers mark. But if you see that in the history of the car, the brake pads were changed like 4 or 5 times at BMW, it tells you the car was driven hard. But driving a car hard doesn't mean that the car is bad. But what that can tell you is that if you approximate, let's say you assume brake pads every 30,000 kilometers, the car has been through 4 brake changes, which would put the mileage around about 120,000. But the cluster shows you 70,000, then there's something wrong. Because a car with 70,000 kilometers on it and you've changed the brake pads or discs 4 times, could raise red flags there. So a lot of it will revolve around the cold start of the car, because the cold start will give you an indication, especially on pneumatic cars. Pneumatic cars tend to give the issue of the wastegate rattling. On cold start, with especially on the N54, when you start the car up and if you hear those pot banging noises, then you are able to understand, okay, there might be a problem on the turbo side. Again, you can use this in your negotiations or walk away from the deal, depending on how the car was advertised. If the car was advertised as a modded car and you're willing to take the risk, then well and good. Those are some things that you would need to consider, and it obviously would be factored into the price itself. Now, the controversy of this particular discussion is that how do you actually determine if the car was modified and whether you're willing to take the risk, or is the owner deceiving you? I would rather be upfront and tell the car, hey, you know what, this particular car was modified, so please, you know what, you would anticipate certain things in the car to be not as OEM as possible. So if possible, and if you're buying a car and if the car is at a premium, what I would generally do is I would remove the ECU cover. On the BMW specifically, and especially the N54, the green power tape connector, what you have to do is you actually have to open the clip, and the clip folds backwards. But as the clip folds backwards, there's a very thin hinge, a plastic hinge, and those things generally break. So once you have removed the ECU cover and you can see that the panel has actually been broken or the tabs has been broken, it will give you an indication that, you know what, this car did have a piggyback on it as well. And so my suggestion would be, have a look on the inside, have a look at the ECU compartment, see if the clips are broken. Also look on the T-map sensor, because generally guys don't know how to remove the T-map sensor, and what happens is they tend to break the clips. So either, again, if somebody has gone out and replaced the T-map sensor with a new clip, it's very difficult for you to tell. The next thing that I would look at is I would go and see the car with some sort of ECU reader, whether it be Kali, whether it be some Bluetooth device or something where you can just get an understanding of what the codes are on the car. If you can get a log of the car, if the car is modified and it's been sold as a modified car, ask the owner for a log and have a look at the log and see how the car is actually performing, how recent the log is, because that will give you the best indication of the health of the motor. The reason being is that from that log you'll be able to determine what is the timing, the fueling, what's my ignition sitting at, what is my pressures on my fueling system, and so forth. So I would actually like to buy a car with a reputable tune on it, not something where somebody has put a tune on it and you can't access the DME to see the logs. No, that I would stay away from. But something like a JB4 or MHD or something where I can get the log from, because that's more meaningful than actually physically looking at the motor. Physically reading or seeing the data from the motor is where I would want to be at. So a car with MHD on it is a plus in my side, or with the JB4, or with some sort of tune where you can actually log the car and read the logs itself. So that for me is a big plus. Then have a look on the inside of the motor to see if there's any silicone. Generally, with a car with full maintenance history on the car and wasn't serviced at an aftermarket place, or did not use OEM parts, they would use things like Victor Rhines and things like that. There as a protection barrier against maybe a failing gasket or something like that. Have a look and see if there's things like that, and see if it ties back to the history of the car. Meaning, if the guy tells you that the car has service history and it was only done at BMW, I know for a fact BMW don't use the silicone sealant. They use only the gasket because they use the torque of the bolt to actually hold the gasket down and firmly in place. So they wouldn't generally use stuff like that. So have a look and see if there's any, apart from seeing the oil leaks or the coolant leaks and things like that, there, have a look to see if there's any silicone BMW leaning like this here. Guys generally put a bead of silicone gasket along this side here of the motor, because why the oil would seep like that there. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Then the next thing that you would need to look at, I haven't gone through the numbers as yet there, but what I'll do is I'll put it in the link below. I'll put the description of all of these things so that you have it when you're going to look out for the car, and you don't actually have to watch the video when you buy in the car itself. The other thing that you can look for is look at the clamps itself. So on the car itself, BMW will put a clamp to the exact diameter of the car itself. So meaning if the pipe is 63mm, they would generally put a 63mm clamp, or 64 or 66mm clamp, and you won't have that pigtail sitting on the outside of the clamp. So guys would generally put like a 100mm clamp over a 60mm pipe, and then you have this long piece of metal that sits out. BMW does not do that there. So that's another indication of whether the car has been tampered with or not. Then the next thing that I would generally look out for is that try and get an insurance report. So apart from the BMW report, sometimes they'll repair the car at BMW, which is a good thing. They actually penalize you, the car has a comment, and that I would actually buy a car with a comment. Reason being is that it was done at BMW. Not to say that their work is the greatest, but at least you know it's a full track and full track history on the car, and the person actually took care and got it repaired at BMW with the intention of using OEM parts. But see for an insurance report on the car itself. This will give you an indication as to what or how severe, if there was any accidents on the car, what was replaced, who did the job, how was it done, and so forth. But generally, those type of works, when it's done through insurance, will come with like a 10-year or 12-year guarantee on the paint work. The next thing is that when buying any used car, especially N54, since they are problematic in terms of the turbos itself, what I would generally look out for is I'll go with two people to view the car. The second person will actually drive behind me, and what they'll view to see if the car is smoking on acceleration, smoking on deacceleration, and so forth. That will give me an indication of how good the motor is as well. It's not a true indication of how the motor is, but reasonable. You don't want to go out and buy a car that's smoking and you come to the next stop sign and you got this whole puff of smoke come past your window, and then you already spent 300,000 on a car. That's a no-go. Then the last thing that I would look out for, amongst all of the other things that you have already googled for, is I'll look at the tires. And why the tires? The reason being is that generally tires will give you an indication of what type of owner had the car. So if you go out and you see that the guy has Michelin Pilot Super Sport 4s, or it has Pirelli P0s on it, or it has Cup tires on it, that will indicate that the owner took pride and joy when replacing the tires. He didn't go out there and just put any cheap tire on the car. So something like that there is a good indication for me that the owner really took care of the car. Even if motor, or it has the wrong clamps, or it has things like that there, but the tire for me gives me an indication as to how the car was looked after. Was it maintained correctly? Then the other thing is, on BMWs, the water pumps do tend to give an issue. So I would go out there and look at, or bring the car up to temperature. So from having it at the cold start, bring it up to temperature, see that the water is, see if the car is not overheating. Or when the car is cold, try and prime the water pump and see the flow. Open up the bottle and see the flow that's coming through. Is the flow strong, or is it a weak flow? Those are things that can give you an indication of a failing water pump. Again, not necessarily the best thing to do, but the best under the circumstances, given the resources available to you at that particular point. This is kind of a brief overview of what you can look out for when purchasing a used BMW. The list is not comprehensive because we can go on and speaking for hours and hours what to look out for, but these are the small little things that you need to look out for. So apart from the known problems, so like take for example an N54 has its known issues, injectors, we kind of sorted that out with a cold start. The water pump, open the bottle, prime it, have a look. Then again, have a look at your series on your injectors. You might be in for, series 12 replacement injectors, and that do cost a lot of money. Then the other things that you might look out for in terms of specifically N54s is like the charge pipe, whether the charge pipe is cracked. If the car has an aftermarket intercooler, well and good. You can't really shun the guy for that there. The standard one really didn't meet up to the requirements in any case. And then look at the clamps on the car. Oh, by the way, a nice tip is on the steering pump on the N54, it uses a specific clamp that has this, pliers that you actually clamp it. It's like a one-time use clamp. If that thing has a clamp where it uses a screwdriver, you know it was removed. You can ask the correct questions, you can probe the correct question. Generally, when the guys remove their engines out of the car, they just break off that clamp and put a new clamp on there. So I think Worth sells those clamps as well. So again, have a look, see if the BMW stamp is on the clamp, and then it's just basically, this video is out there to probe you or to get you thinking as to what are the questions I need to ask when I am buying a new car, and see if the answer corresponds to the history of the car itself.
Guys, subscribe this channel, guys, and click the like button on the below. Okay? No.